Now let's move forward to our next topic, the information society. Next slide. At the end of this lesson, the student will be able to determine the human and social impacts of the developments in the information age, discuss the evolution of technology from ancient times up to the present, and illustrate how social media have affected our lives. Next slide. Today's society introduces to us an infinite number of possibilities with the technology that we have developed through the years, decades, and even centuries. We often think about technology as the latest innovation, the smartphone, the 3D printer, the VR headset. It's only by taking a longer view, however, that we can understand its entwining with our species' existence. For technology is more than computers, cars, or gadgets. It is the entirety of human-made artifacts that extend and amplify our grasp to the world. As the philosopher Hannah Arendt put it in 1958, we have in recent centuries developed a science that considers the nature of the earth from the viewpoint of the universe. Yet in doing so, we have paradoxically trained ourselves to ignore the most important lesson of all, our co-evolution with technology. Technology has become the forefront of innovation and change that revolutionizes the socio-economic lives of the people. Technological advances have become increasingly socio-economic stratification in a number of ways. On the most basic level of what Robinson et al. Describes as digital disparities, people without access to internet are at a disadvantage for factors such as academic performance and labor market success. Beyond the lack of internet use, digital disparities take the form of differences in ability and participation in the digital world. Modern technology also influences the labor market. The demand for high-skilled tech jobs, as well as technological invention and innovation, is very high, which leads to extremely high income for the few that can fill these roles. On the other end of the spectrum, as new ways to automate lower-skilled jobs are invented, more people are left jobless or with poor wages due to the low demand of these jobs. The integration of these technological innovations in information and communication change how society approaches our way of life. For better or for worse, technology affects communication because it is a part of our everyday lives. It impacts the way we work, entertain ourselves, and stay in touch. Technology communication affects us continuously. As we make technological advances, new trends and communications emerge and often become the norm. Access to learning opportunities today is unprecedented in scope thanks to technology. Opportunities for communication and collaboration have also been expanded by technology. More can be learned from the next reporters.
Starting off our topic regarding information society, I am going to relay the message of Grant Dillard, the speaker on a TED Talk video included in our course pack. He emphasized the negative impacts of technology on communication. He first stated that technological advancements deteriorates our abilities in verbal communication. For instance, communicating through chats. It is now our means of communication today, like messenger chats. We can talk through text, emojis, stickers, GIFs, calls, and even video chats. Hence, most of us prefer to chat through text, which unknowingly deteriorates our skills in verbally speaking. Since we became overly dependent on silent communication, we forget to give value to our verbal communication skills. The progress of technology is now one issue for our communication skills. During like physical meetup, we cannot use our phones to communicate, like this online setup we have today. When face-to-face class start, we need to participate verbally since our phones are prohibited in the classroom. Grant Dillard wants us to remind that we must nurture our verbal communication skills. It will be our asset during thesis defense, job interviews, assessing conflicts, and many more. Aside from that, he wants us to live in the present. We must have less time on our phones and more time living in the present. We must talk more with our families, and during get togethers, we must turn off our phones and talk to our friends. We must not be driven by technology to be mentally absent, where in fact, we are always physically present. For the next report, she will tackle about the role of language.
In regards to Anka Serbus, the significance of language as a tool of communication. These are the roles of language in modern society. Language is a vital source of human connection. Language is a vital part of human connection. Although all species have their ways of communicating, humans are the only ones that have mastered cognitive language communication. Language allows us to share our ideas, thoughts, and feelings with others. It has the power to build societies but also tear them down. Language is what makes us human. It is how people communicate. By learning a language, it means you have mastered a complex system of words, structure, and grammar to effectively communicate with others. Second, it is a fundamental aspect in the expression of culture, as it is a tool that conveys traditions and values related to a group identity. Language helps us express our feelings and thoughts. This is unique to our species because it is a way to express unique ideas and customs within different cultures and societies. By learning a foreign language, you can understand ideas and thoughts that may be different from your own culture. You can learn customs and how people interact in a given society. Language helps preserves culture, but it also allows us to learn about others and spread ideas quickly. Language is intrinsic to the expression of culture as a means of communicating values, beliefs, and customs. It is an important social function and fosters feelings of group identity and solidarity. It is means by which culture and traditions, our shared values, may be conveyed and preserved. Finally, it transcends beyond speaking because it also is as powerful in writing. The method of expressing oneself in writing is by using the alphabet and forming words on a piece of paper or any type of material. However, it is more than just an ink blotch on a piece of paper. It also signifies preservation. Spoken words are ephemeral, but in writing, written words are more lasting and unmodifiable. And writing is indeed a tool of power. It caused wars, but also allowed others to gain freedom. It holds secrets of the past. That is why sometimes writing is not just a pen, but a dagger.
And for letter B, mathematics as the language of nature. Modern technology will be unthinkable without mathematics. The relationship is reciprocal since mathematics also need technologies. Today, mathematicians use computers not only for calculation but also for numerous other tasks, including the search for proof, validations, and counterexamples. Being able to communicate mathematics using these different type of languages is a key part of understanding and using mathematics. Therefore, we need to learn both how to use symbols to describe things and learn to translate between natural language and the mathematical symbolic language. And for that, as many scientists and mathematicians claim that mathematics is an universal law, mathematics has been the basis for precision, and mathematics also use as well-defined and objective definition of things. Whenever a mathematician construct a definition or theorem, he or she always makes sure that the definition is well defined. And And that's for my report. Next reporter, please.
And by that, we are now on the printing press and beyond. So, the history of printing press. The printing press is a device that allows for the mass production of uniform printed matter, mainly text in the form of books, pamphlets, and newspapers. Created in China, the printing press revolutionized society there before being further developed in Europe in the 15th century by Johannes Gutenberg and his invention of the Gutenberg press. No one knows when the first printing press was invented or who invented it, but the oldest known printed text originated in China during the first millennium AD. Around the late 1430s, a German man named Johann Gutenberg was quite desperate to find a way to make money. At that time, there was a trend in attaching small mirrors to one's hat or clothes in order to soak up healing powers when visiting holy places or icons. The mirrors themselves were not significant, but Gutenberg quietly noted how lucrative it was to create mass amount of a cheap product. During the 1300s to 1400s, people have developed a very basic form of printing. It involves letter or images cut on blocks of wood. The block would be dipped in ink and then stamped onto paper. Gutenberg already had previous experience working in a mint, and he realized that if he could use cut blocks within a machine, he could make the printing process a lot faster. Even better, he would be able to produce text in great numbers. Instead of using wood blocks, Gutenberg used metal instead. This became known as a movable type machine, since the metal block letters could be moved around to create new words and sentences. With this machine, Gutenberg made the very first printed book, which was naturally a reproduction of the Bible. Today, the Gutenberg Bible is an incredibly valuable, treasured item for its historical legacy. How does printing press works? Medieval presses uses a handle to turn a wooden screw that moved the platen, on which the paper was mounted. The platen squeezed the paper against the type, which was locked in a place in a frame or form. Metal presses developed late in the 18th century used steam to drive a cylinder press. With the original printing press, a frame is used to set groups of type blocks. Together, these blocks make words and sentences. However, they are all in reverse. The blocks are all inked, and then a sheet of paper is laid on the blocks. All of this passes through a roller to ensure that the ink is transferred to the paper. Finally, the paper is lifted, and then the reader can see the inked letters that now appear normally as a result of the reversed block. These printing presses were operated by hand. Later, towards the 19th century, the other inventors created steam-powered printing presses that did not require hand operator. In comparison, today's printing press are electronic and automated and can print much faster than ever before. Today, there are multiple types of printing presses and each best for a specific type of printing. And now we're on to the contributions of the printing press to the history. Printing press was the first printer enabled to produce hundreds of copies of a single work. For the first time, books were cheap enough that many people could afford them. Its immediate effect was that it spread information quickly and accurately. This helped create a wider literate reading public. However, its importance lies not just on how it spreads information and opinions, but also in what sorts of information and opinions it was spreading. Most of us tends to take printed materials for granted, but imagine life today if the printing press had never been invented. We would not have books, magazines, newspapers, posters, flyers, pamphlets, and mailers would not exist. The printing press allows us to share large amount of information quickly and in huge numbers. In fact, the printing press is so significant that it has come to be known as one of the most important inventions of our time, and it drastically changed the way society evolved. Now, we're on to the 10 ways the printing press changed the world. First, news distribution. One of the most profound contributions Gutenberg's printing press brought to the world was the widespread availability of the news. Next is the access to knowledge and the Enlightenment. Long before the printing press, access to knowledge was limited to subsets of society deemed as the nobility, monarchy, and the clergy. During an incredible critical time in history, philosophers such as Voltaire, John Locke, and many others were read by a population that was growing in terms of their literary prowess. The Enlightenment is one of the most important moments in history, made possible thanks to Gutenberg's inventions from centuries before the movement took place. Thanks to the widespread availability of knowledge and information, people grew in literacy capabilities. The improved access to knowledge meant the ideas of Voltaire, Locke, and so many others weren't just for the select few, but anyone who wanted to devour these bold concepts that challenged the status quo. And now we're on to the scientific revolution. With the invention of the printing press, science was changed forever. Scientific discoveries, methods, and experimental data could now be shared with more great minds much faster, and this resulted in a revolution of sort during the 16th and 17th century when science took significant leaps forward in the understanding of our world. In number 4, fringe movements has access to an audience. Arguably, some of the greatest minds of enlightenment found access to larger swaths of population thanks to the printing press. However, while some of those minds got to express their views on a grander scale, they weren't the only ones. They'd all already had their voice heard. They benefited from more people hearing their ideas, thoughts, and perceptions of various topics well before the printing press. Now, the people who were shut out of the earliest system of information sharing were finding their own renaissance of sort. Next on the list is the jobs and the rise of machines. As the printing press became more widely adopted, scribes were left without work. This was one of the early glimpses into the reality of adopting machines, as they replaced the need for manual labor on a grand scale. Before Gutenberg's revolutionary invention, scribes were looking for bookmakers creating intricately designed hand copies of manuscripts and documents. With the printing press, their service became less required until their roles in the production of literature were minimized to the brink of being obsolete. Number 6 on the list is the Renaissance. The printing press allowed the Renaissance to accelerate to speeds unthought of by the leaders of the pivotal Italian movement, a movement that birthed rediscovery, art, intellectuals, and the accessible sharing of knowledge was now happening faster and was more expansive in its reach. Number 7th on the list is the first best-selling author. Today, best-selling authors exist in droves, but before the printing press, it wasn't possible. Long before there even was a bestsellers list, there was one man who became the world's first known best-selling author, and his story was one of rebellion against the establishment, and it was Martin Luther. Number 8 is the rise of novels. Novels existed before the printing press, but not in a grand scale. Rare, often one-of-a-kind novels were created as early as 868 AD by historical estimation. In Dunhuang, China, they used the block printing method where they utilized panels of handcrafted wooden blocks in reverse. The oldest known book crafted in Dunhuang during the Tang dynasty was titled the Diamond Sutra, which was a Buddhist book. Number 9th on the list, the printing press, an agent for political change. There are many instances throughout history where the printing press has acted as an agent for political change. This was, and still is, a powerful weapon which has swung both ways. Revolutions such as the French Revolution in 1789 were led by philosophers who sought to question everything from nature to God itself. Through the Renaissance, armed with knowledge and growing literary rates, they were able to capture the attentions of the everyday man, which resulted in a revolution against the monarchy. The printing press meant that anyone could make their voices heard. This sometimes meant the sharing of ideas or propaganda to help change the political landscape of a nation for the good of the people or to their detriment. And lastly, for the number 10, created a world that could advance faster. Advancement would have happened without the printing press, but it opened doors to undeniable possibility. There are, obviously, lingering effects of a pivotal invention that have long outlived the first iteration. There are moments in history that may have never been possible without the printing press. Gutenberg's creation facilitated a world that could advance faster on a technological, scientific, and sociological level. That is all for my report. The next reporter will be discussing the World Wide Web.
Now, on the last part of our report, which is the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web, or commonly referred to as WWW or the W3 or the web, is an interconnected system of public web pages accessible through the internet. What is the importance of World Wide Web to us? So, World Wide Web opened up the internet to everyone. It connected the world in a way that made it much easier for people to get information, to communicate, and to share with other people. It also allow people to share their works and thoughts through social networking sites like blogs, video sharing, and more. And also for us students, it allows us to access a broad range of activities. The web became our portal to research and communication. But who are the two people behind the discovery of World Wide Web? So we have here Mr. Robert Cailloux. So Mr. Robert Cailloux is a Belgian informatics engineer, computer scientist, and author who proposed the first pre-WWW hypertext system for CERN in 1987. But during 1989, Mr. Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. So, next slide please. So, what are the components of the web? So, there are three components of the web consisting of the URL or the Uniform Resource Locator, the HTTP or the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and lastly, the Hypertext Markup Language or the HTML. So, URL, it serves as a system for resources on the web. It is the name of your resources online. Every entity that accesses the elements uses, refers to, reads, and otherwise consumes the structure of your URL as an instrumental part of the web page. So, next is the HTTP. It specifies communication of browser and server. It allows your web browser, example like Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Apple Safari, or the Internet Explorer to communicate with the server where any given website is hosted. For example, like accessing Facebook through Google Chrome, diba? As we can see, we need to put first HTTP facebook.com, like that. So HTML, lastly is HTML. It defines structure, organization, and content of a web page. It's a fundamental technology behind everything you see in a web browser. And it's used to build everything from simple web pages to complex web applications and services. Lastly, HTML elements from the building blocks of all websites forms the building blocks of all websites. Also, HTML allows images and objects to be embedded and can be used to create interactive forms. Next slide. So that's the end of our report. Our group sincerely appreciate your attention this afternoon, and that brings us to the end. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention today. Thank you so much, and God bless.